Hello everyone, and welcome to this presentation on an overview of coastal environments. We're going to start by just giving you a bit of information to preface our course. First off, the ocean covers approximately 72% of the Earth and constitutes 97% of the Earth's water. 80% of the ocean still remains to be explored, so there's a good reasoning for investing a lot of energy in studying coastal and offshore environments. It's estimated that between 50 and 80% of life, so approximately 230,000 species at this point in time that are known, make up life within Earth. So that's up to 10 times more the amount of living organisms than are in existence today on land. The average depth of the ocean is approximately a little over 3,700 meters as compared to approximately 800 meters in height on land. Now, there's several different basins of water that we talk about in coastal and oceanic environments. This largely can be organized into 5 oceans: the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans. And oftentimes throughout this course, as well as any materials that you might review online, you can see that the designation of those oceans is largely kind of driven by the circulation that occurs within those basins. However, there is one continuous body of water that exists on Earth, despite the fact that we talk about 5 different oceans. So, as you can see in this figure, there's at no point in time where an ocean is explicitly cut off from the other bodies of water. Geologic history has shown there to be changes in these ocean basins. There's a couple different important geologic dates that correspond to coastal environments and the organisms that exist there. First off, one important one is about 4.5 billion years ago is where Earth is believed to have originated. Then 200 million years ago or so is where the oldest oceanic crust is believed to have been formed. And then 180 million years ago is where there is documentation thought that Pangaea begins to break apart into continents, and thus starts the formation of those ocean basins. And Pangaea, if you're not aware of, was one giant landmass that turned into the broken up continents that we have currently. Now, if we kind of take a look at this figure, and we're not going to get too much into the geologic kind of aspect and how the Earth is organized. However, we will point out the fact that there's a convergence between that oceanic crust and the continental crust. So the oceanic crust often runs just below the continental crust, and this is important because of the fact that there's sedimentary deposits that occur there. From there, you have layering upon the mantle, ultimately the upper mantle here. However, this interaction between the oceanic crust and continental crust is what's responsible for the formation of some of the coastal environments that we are familiar with and discuss in this course. Seawater, just to give you a bit of an overview, is a mix of pure water and materials dissolved in it, which comes from things such as chemical weathering of rocks carried by rivers. So water basically erodes those rocks higher on the landforms, and that gets carried from the rivers to the oceanic regions or the coastal environments. And then also the Earth's interior. So from volcanoes, you all probably noticed recently the Tonga devastation that occurred and the tsunami that occurred there as a result of this volcanic eruption in the Pacific Ocean. So there's certainly a contribution that occurs when those volcanoes do erupt, and they do erupt quite frequently underwater, which we don't really hear about as often. Approximately 98% of the solids are made up of 6 ions. So sodium and chloride constitute about 80% of the solids that are found in seawater. And just to give you an idea of the average salinity in seawater, it's approximately 35 parts per thousand. And there's a couple different important definitions that we use when discussing coastal environments. First off, a coastal environment is defined as an interaction of land and sea processes. So if there is that interaction between the two environments, then we term it or call it or refer to it as a coastal environment. The coast is actually something, this figure gives us an idea of what we typically think of the coast, however, and it includes all areas from the offshore ocean habitat, so including the region at the continental shelf and the continental slope, and the inland areas where there's interactions between the land and the sea, so regions such as estuaries and lagoons. We tend to focus on just this coastal zone, which is represented in the figure here to the right, where we have the beach with the water interacting directly with the land, but there's actually a larger region that encompasses and comprises coastal environments. Coastal environments can be quite diverse. There are the coastal landforms are actually derived from the kind of, like I said, the interaction of where the land meets the sea, and also where the fresh water is going to influence and interact with this oceanic kind of saltier water, which can influence and develop certain environments and habitats. So these landforms that are locally found adjacent to a coastal environment are largely responsible for some of the characteristics of those coastal environments as well. The coastal landform features consist of and can change the coastline with things such as a rise and fall of the sea level, a buildup of sediment deposits in sandy beach, the erosion of the coast in regions of rocky or rugged areas, as well as old features breaking down, such as stacks or caves. So there's this kind of transformation that occurs over time that modifies those coastal regions as well, coastal environments. There's several different coast types. They are shaped by non-marine processes, typically as the primary kind of method by which those coast types are formed. One of those involves tectonic shaping, such as along the Oregon coast. There's fluvial processes that can shape a coast, such as the Mississippi coastline, and then glacial regions, such as the Norway fjords. So a lot of the kind of processes that occur around the globe are going to be responsible for that. Secondarily, though, these coasts are shaped by marine erosion or deposition. So, for example, the barrier islands, the coastal headlands, and atolls are typically going to be formed by this erosive kind of method or process. We find that there are intertidal coastal regions, which consist of some examples of them are the rocky shores, the sandy or gravel beaches, cliffs or tidal flats, peat shores, mangroves, estuaries, and lagoons and bays, and offshore kind of regions. So the intertidal regions are going to be where there's kind of a submergence of the land at some period of time, but then exposure during the day. So kind of that direct and very close interaction region. And then the subtidal regions are going to consist of things such as coral reefs, seagrasses, kelp forests, and a soft or muddy bottom. So those different coastal environments are going to be submerged and typically are not going to be exposed to the air. So there's different ways in which humans kind of view the coast or perceive the coast. We tend to think of it in terms of what we need and how it can be valuable to us. So how is it that we use the coast? Because in talking about coastal environments, there's really this important socioeconomic element that's important to how it's managed, as well as how its conservation measures that are put in place. And that's going to vary from one country to the next, as well as given certain resources by a country. So how is it that we tend to use the coast? We use it for food, for shipping and trade. There's environmental defense services, so there's important defense that occurs along our coasts. Industry uses it for waste as well as water purification. Tourism and recreation are big uses of the coast. Flood control is another way in which we kind of use it, and I guess abstractly. And then being able to explore it's more of an intrinsic element of how we use the coast, but we really do tend to appreciate the biodiversity and life along those coastal environments. So those are some ways that we kind of interact with the coast. Our values influence the coastal use. So the environment has value because it provides a benefit, such as food, shelter, clothing. Medicine is being explored largely now in entertainment. And there's an intrinsic value, however. The environment has value regardless of whether it can be used or benefited from. And this would constitute some of the more things we're focused on recently with preserving habitat. And that includes the wilderness, the deep ocean, and saving endangered species. Our values are influenced by environmental use. And in this figure, which is the economic valuation of ecosystem goods and services, that was developed by Barbier et al. In 2011, you can see that the ecosystem structure and function and the goods and services are really kind of provide different values for a particular region, and that is going to link directly to human actions and private and public kind of regulation and use of a region, and that's going to feed back into the ecosystem. So human interactions and use and regulation and what have you will actually drive the ecosystem. So it's really cyclical nature. We find there's some goods that are provided, intrinsic and what have you, that the humans decide how they use it, and that kind of feeds into how we treat the ecosystem and how it benefits and grows later. So that is just a little bit about an overview of coastal environments for you.